because every person has a story. It doesn't have to do how traumatic your story is. As long as you all have something to share that can impact and help others. Welcome to another edition of the Journey to Freedom podcast. And I'm Dr. B, your host. And just, as we get to do more of these and as we get to find out more about the unique cultures of Black men, I just find it interesting that the further that we all are apart, the more I figure out we're the same. The more I figure out that some of our experiences and the wealth of and breadth of knowledge that we're able to talk about, there are just so many themes. Whether you're in a family from Southern California, I just got done doing a podcast here in Southern Florida. I did one for a few people in the last few weeks that are in New York. I had somebody that was from, the state of Washington. And then everywhere in between. And today I have Audley, and his family heirs from the Caribbean, and then they migrated up to Canada. And what's amazing is some of the same experiences are the same. I guess our cultures, when you go back 200, 300, 400 years into the past, there's just some themes that our ancestors, values that they imparted to us, things that they wanted us to feel about. And then we add in all these things like technology and internet and, these wonderful things that we get to do. But some things never stay the same. And so excited today. Audley and I I was able to go onto his podcast. It's been about a couple of weeks ago now. And then once I did, I realized I need to have this dude on a podcast with me and to be able just to talk about, audacious. One of my favorite words that I get to talk about is I want to be audacious. I want to step out there. I want to make sure things are happening. And he's the epitome of making that happen. So I want to talk a little bit during this thing, but I want you really to kind of just go over your story. You can start, I tell everybody, you can start at the womb to up to now, or you can start anywhere in between. So it is your chance to highlight the best parts of your life. And maybe sometimes we have a lot of people talk about, hey, maybe not so much of the best parts of my life, but it's my story and who I am. And so thank you for being on the podcast today. Thank you for being part of this Journey to Freedom program as we're interviewing 100 Black men this year and just finding out some incredible things about people. So I'll let you go ahead and take off, and then we'll just go from there. I appreciate it, Dr. B. I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you again. And you're right. We had a great time a couple of weeks ago on my podcast, and I remember walking away. I guess maybe you can kind of relate to this a little bit as well too. But I consider myself blessed to have the opportunity to sit down and engage with individuals, and the intent is to co-create something together to share with the rest of the world, help maybe people use that in their own lives to bring themselves to a better place, if you will. But every time I leave a conversation, I feel like I've robbed and stolen because I've gotten all this stuff for myself. I feel like I'm the one that won. And really the intent was to give to others. And I know after our conversation, I really appreciate your level of energy and passion and commitment to wanting to have a positive impact on others. And I'm oftentimes told I've got this great energy. When I watched you, I was like, wow, that guy's got energy. And so I really, really appreciated that. Maybe I was looking in a mirror, I don't know, but it felt good to see. And I can understand better what people experience when they interact with me. And so, again, I appreciate you spending the time that you did. My story, it's interesting. I remember a few years ago, several years back, I'll tell you this quick story. I entered into a professional speaking competition. Okay. And at the time, I told a story about leadership and how we're all individual leaders through our actions and the things that we do, and we all have the ability to impact others through our actions. So I went up to this competition. I gave my speech. I felt great. I told analogies to my kids when they were younger, and again about leadership. The woman that came after me, she got up on stage and she proceeded to tell a story about a car accident she got into, and the traumatic impact it had on her.
she described like the mangling of the wheels and the tires and the metal crushing in the glass and all the beautiful imagery as she spoke. And at the end of the competition, she was named the winner. And I remember at the end of the night, I was in a coat check, and there was these two women in front of me. And one of the women they were just sort of talking about the events of that evening. And the woman had said, wow, like that's how you win these things. You have to have a really powerful story. And I remember overhearing that saying, oh, I guess I don't have a good enough story. And I walked away, but years later, I'm processing this. So like, this has nothing to do with the story, because every person has a story. It has to do with how traumatic your story is. As long as you all have something to share that can impact and help others. And so, no, I wasn't raised in poverty. I had my mother. I didn't have my father growing up, but I was a happy child. There were no sort of traumatic events that took place that affected me or followed me through my whole life. I was raised in love. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable, and we had what we needed. And more importantly, we were loved. My upbringing was pretty normal. It was pretty normal as a kid, just kind of living life and enjoying it. I was happy. We had family, and that's all that mattered. As I began to sort of go out in the world and launch into the world, understand the world better, I certainly realized that I at least I always felt that I was different in that I had a way of connecting with people and relating to people. And it didn't take me long to understand the importance of sort of my communication skills. And then, with skills, you sort of build on that, right? So you can relate to people, you develop empathy, you develop understanding, and other things sort of naturally blossom like that. At least that's what my experience was. And I was always inquisitive, and I was always curious about life. And there was a piece of me, although I didn't understand what the word audaciousness meant or what audacity was, now that I had the opportunity to sort of look back on my life, I realized I was demonstrating all the way throughout. And in fact, that's even how the Audacious Living podcast came to be, where I got to the point where I was like, you know something? I want to do something special and unique that matters to me. And when I did the analysis of my life, it was just that. I was like, wow, this didn't happen unless I took that chance. And if I didn't take that chance, it would have taken me here, and I wouldn't have gone there, and the dots wouldn't have connected the way they did for me. And it really is. I've heard this saying many times, and I use it. Life, it doesn't make sense forward. It makes sense in reverse, right? Because when you're living your life forward, it's an art. You're kind of just going through and figuring it out and trying to make things work. But when you stop and look back, Dr. B, it's a science, and it all made sense, and everything connected for a specific reason. And that's what I found in my life. I was a big basketball fan, really avid with the game of basketball. And I used that. I played, but not at a high level. I was never good enough. But what I did do is I found ways to stay as close to the sport as possible. And I actually got involved with the sport from a broadcasting standpoint. Okay. And broadcasting actually led me to get involved with podcasting. Now, this is something clear, because this was in 2008. In 2008, podcasts were barely heard of. But these days, they're like a business card, kind of everyone's got one, right? But back then, they were this new thing. And I jumped on fairly early and married my interest in basketball, the sport, and podcasting together. And it grew. A partner of mine, we did very, very well. Because we were from Toronto, Canada, and Canada was deemed as a hockey country, we were kind of this novelty, right? It was this big ball black guy and this little short Portuguese guy talking about basketball. Like, it didn't make sense for a lot of people, but it was curious enough for people to be engaged and interested in what we were doing. And we actually were I oftentimes say we weren't the first, but the second podcast that actually got media credentials by the Toronto Raptors, my hometown. So now we're in locker rooms interviewing players, living our dream, having fun, enjoying life. And all the while, we were just sort of doing what we wanted, everything we did came out of taking that chance. And so I go back to the audacious thing again, right? Everything we did came out of that. What that actually did is in 2011, I'll follow the chain here, I'll try and be brief here. In 2011, there was a new league that started here in Canada called the National Basketball League of Canada. 2011 also happened the same year the NBA was on a lockout year, so there's no basketball content. And now if there's no content, there's social media. There's no content from the league, if you will. Social media will give you all that you need to know. Well, back then, the only social media channels were Twitter and Facebook, and it wasn't they weren't utilized
Yeah.
like they are now. And so I had decided to get involved with this new league because it was a pro basketball. It was in Canada. I was a passion of mine, and so why not? I got involved, and I came to them with my podcasting expertise because I developed this expertise after 3 or 4 years had passed. So they welcomed me in. I came in as a volunteer because I wanted to be able to demonstrate, here, I can do this for you. I did that for about 3 years. I got a position in the league. I got another position in the league. And then, 3 years after that, I was actually appointed the commissioner of that particular league because of just my expertise and what I had done and all my experiences. But I oftentimes tell this story to individuals that there's no way I come in as a volunteer, that move from volunteer to actually managing and running the league if I didn't take that first step, if I didn't take that first chance, if I didn't try. And these are all key aspects of when we talk about audaciousness. These are key aspects of that, because if you're not doing those things, and you're not really knowing what kind of impact you can have. And so, yeah, I'm blessed to be able to do a lot of the new things I've done in life, but more importantly, the difference I've been able to make in others was really what mattered to me the most.
Oh, cool. So you're in Toronto. What are the things that you're excited about over in the last year, or the things that you're wanting to do with your life? I mean, it sounds like it's been super fulfilling, and you're able to do all these other things. But what are you most excited about right now?
I have to go back to impact. It's something that's become more and more important to me as time has gone on. I'm a father of 3, and so the first and foremost, I want to have an impact on my children's lives in a positive fashion. As I think any father, you'd want that for your children. You want them to do his best, do as well as they possibly can in life. So that's been very important to me. To my immediate sphere of influence, family, friends, my community, to be able to take. For me, there's nothing more exciting than be able to take your natural skills, your gifts, your abilities, and use them to the best that you possibly can, and it actually helps and makes a difference for other people. And so I've really been hung up as of late about impact and different ways I can have impact, but also being authentic and true to who I am. And so the vehicle, like my podcast is an example. That's been an excellent vehicle for me, a platform to be able to do that. And then other sort of community events that I've been involved with the last little while also has given me that chance to have that kind of impact I'm craving.
I love the word impact, because as I think of it, in my vision, in my dream, and the things that I'm working on is, how do I help people become the person they need to be so they can go out and do what they were intended to do in this life, what I believe God has put them on this earth to do. Mm-hmm. One of the things when I think about impact, though, is I meet so many people, and I'm around so many different people, and I worry sometimes that is my impact allowing them to grow? Is my impact allowing them to stay stuck? Is my impact, allowing them to become that person? And then what do I need to do inside of me so that I can reach them, so that it is making it? And I realize, I'm not going to impact everybody, right? And I'm not going to be the person who's going to be able, but can I at least plant that seed? And so it becomes a responsibility. I think of something that's like Spider-Man say, with great power comes great responsibility or something. So how, when you think about impact and you say, okay, I want to make an impact, what does that mean in reality of like how you show up at places?
And it's a great line of questioning. And Uncle Ben, when he told Peter Parker that, I always said he's a smart man. I wish he was my uncle sometimes, because it does come great responsibility. But in all seriousness, to be able, I think the most important thing, if you want to have true, authentic, sustainable, long-lasting impact, it starts with you being true to who you are. And I'm going to give you an example, because I think one of the things that being true to ourselves, what that does, it gives permission to others to do the same. And for example, I have a friend of mine who several years ago, she's an accountant. She worked for one of the big firms downtown, gone to school, got her all the credentials, and working in the accounting field. One day we were talking, and she started to just disclose that she wasn't happy. She wasn't happy with what she was doing. And as we were exploring, I'm a natural coach by nature, so I'm exploring and asking the question to understand. She talked about not being fulfilled in the work that she was doing. She also proceeded to tell me a story about an individual that she had heard of who was also an accountant and worked in big firm downtown, and she also was not fulfilling the work that she did. But that individual decided to leave the corporate space and enter into the sort of not-for-profit industry, focus on helping small businesses because she was called to do that. And it was so impactful for her. And she made that leap and is completely fulfilled, happy, and is living a wonderful life, if you will, because she's doing the things that she wanted to. And that inspired my friend. My friend felt inspired by that. And she's like, I think that's the direction I want to go into. Now, I tell that story because the friend my person referred to, that original woman has no idea the impact that she's had on my friend. She has no idea about the inspiration that she's provided. All that woman was doing was recognizing I need to do something for me that makes me fulfilled, but also I give me the ability to positively impact this particular community. And so I believe that if we are doing what we are meant to do, what we're called to do, we're talking about our God-given gifts, and we're using them to their fullest potential, we're allowing people to say, hey, I can also do the same. And the other part about this that I truly, like, people are always watching. Everyone is watching, whether they realize it or not. People are watching us. Even if it's just our children, we are being watched and are looking at our actions, looking at how we do things, and also thinking, well, what can I pattern from my own life? That's a natural feeling. So if they're watching, why don't you put your true self on display so they can really see who you really are and what you're really about, and how you got to this level of success, and what the steps were, and what pitfalls did you avoid, what chances did you take. All of these things are important because they allow individuals to recognize, okay, how can I put myself in that same picture? So for me, it really goes back to being as authentic as you possibly can as an individual, and being yourself, and that allows others to see that. And that's when we talk about impact. That's one of the best ways that I think you can do that.
And I love that. When we think about like identity, part of like my 5 pillars, one of them is identity and the people that we hold for ourselves. What do you think over the years in your identity that has changed that allow you to make an impact? Because when we think about, like where I was at 20 years ago, there's probably no way that I get to make some of the impact that I'm making now, or because of the relationships that I've been able to drive and be able to cultivate. And then I think about the Black man's experience, and it may be different in Toronto, but it's almost as if we're taught as young kids sometimes, especially when we have single moms and we have, that we're not enough, that we have to live up to, or we have to look at others, or So what do you think about your identity and what's driven it, and how has it changed over the years?
Well, I think naturally, I mean, for me in my life, the clear and obvious one is becoming a father, right? That changes. The focus no longer is about me and what I want for myself. I've now got the responsibilities of others. And so I think parenthood does that exactly. The jobs that we do, when I became the commissioner of NBL Canada, I started thinking about, okay, what impact do I want our league to have in the communities in which we play? So yes, we have basketball teams in these communities, but we're not just there to play basketball. How do we ingrain ourselves in these communities? How do we have an impact? How do we make a difference? I also think education and knowledge is a big part of this, because as you acquire insights, as you gain knowledge, as you have more experiences, you change your approaches on things, or you enhance what you do things, or you recognize there's different ways of how things can be done. And so that directly relates into impact as well. So the identity, what I love about identity is that, once individuals truly understand who they are, it then fosters a sense of belonging, right? You have the sense of belonging, the sense of community can be developed from that. And then when you have community, so you're not alone, you now can mobilize together as a collective. And then now talk about, they talk about, many hands make the burden light, right? You have an entire community that you can move together and make some powerful and magical things happen.
I love it. When I think of identity, I think of my relationships, right? I think about my micro relationships and my macro relationships.
Sure.
and the people in the rooms that I'm in. You know, they say if you are the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, right? That seems to become. I mean, I was listening to John Maxwell the other day, and he was talking about leadership, and he said, you know, if you are a leader and have no followers, you're just taking a walk in the park. And how many of us are taking that walk because, you know, we're having people follow us because of a position or something? In your life, when I think about relationships and I think about the people that are around you, what have been some of the most impactful relationships? And then how do you try to cultivate, you know, relationships so that they can become even better?
I talked earlier about being raised in a single parent home. My parents split up when I was about 6 months old. So I had no knowledge or memory of my father. And I still remember what happened yesterday. Never mind when I was 6 months old, right? So I had no memory of. He resurfaced in my life when my eldest daughter was 6 months old, actually.
Wow.
And he resurfaced. Red Cross, has a service in which you connect family members. So he used that to seek me out, to find me. Now, at the time that he did so, what I didn't recognize or realize that he had some serious health concerns and his mortality was at risk. And so he felt that what he wanted to do was find his son and connect with his son before his days on this earth were up. So he had done so. And I remember initially meeting him because I grew up happy. I grew up a happy kid, so I have a sense of loss. I was raised with lots of love and laughter and happiness, so I didn't think I was missing out on anything. Mm-hmm. The only piece that stood out for me was the fact that my first name, Audley, was actually my father's name. So I carried the name of someone who I just know. And so when I growing up, there was a bit of a void around that. Like, who is this guy's name? Like, I don't know who he is, kind of thing. But not that it didn't change anything in my life. It didn't have an impact. So when he resurfaced, it sort of filled that void, so to speak. And I was able, it was almost like it was in the circle. We were able to establish a relationship. I'm very happy that there wasn't any kind of grudges or bad feelings, because I would have eaten the amount of time that we had together, because his time on this planet was very short. He actually had 3 years. So 3 years after we met is when he had passed away. And to this day, I'm so appreciative of the time that we had. And there were so many lessons that came out of that for me, because of the fact that I easily could have been resentful and bitter and upset. Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad that I wasn't, because again, like I said, we would have lost time. And time, as you know, is no right? It's a commodity that you take advantage of while you have it. And so I'm proud of the fact that in our case, I also have, to this day, I have a tremendous amount of respect for him seeking me out, because, sometimes you kind of think that, too much time has passed and that it's too late to do things. Why even bother? And it's never too late. It's never, ever too late. Even when you think that it is, it wasn't. And so that for me has been tremendous, because that's a lesson that I carry with me now. And that I recognize that, it's not about what happened yesterday, it's what we can do for today and how we can take advantage of today. And so when you sort of talk about, even as I talk about, the spirit of audaciousness, that's encompassed in it. It's what you can do right now. Absolutely. I had mishaps yesterday. I fell down, I stumbled, made a mistake, whatever. What am I going to do today? And it's interesting. I have this what I call the bold framework, and really, the bold framework is how individuals can live their best audacious lives ever. And it's actually an acronym, BOLD. The B in that framework stands for better than yesterday. So it doesn't matter the successes that you had. It doesn't matter the victories. That was fantastic. You celebrated them. You enjoyed them. You shared them with family and friends. What are you going to do today? So yesterday's mountain is the bottom of tomorrow's mountain. That's the idea. Mm-hmm. The old framework has outlasted adversity. And this is an important one, because we all can relate to having challenges in our lives. Bad things are going to happen eventually to us. It's what we do with them when they arrive. And being able to outlast adversity is so key, Dr. B, and so important, because when we get to the other side, I truly, that the other side of adversity and challenges is where all that greatness lies. but we have to be able to outlast that adversity to get there. So don't quit, keep fighting forward, keep pushing. The L, and that's something I've sort of talked about before, is live your truth. This is really directly tied to being authentic in our actions, right? Being who the person we're supposed to be. I told you the story of my accountant friend. Like, that's so important to live your truth, follow your dream. Yes, we're all on our own individual path, but what you do on yours is going to differ, very different what I do on mine, right? So follow your path. And the last, the letter D in that bold framework is disrupt the norm, right? And go off that beaten path, so to speak. Yes, the masses are going this way. That doesn't mean you have to follow them too. And the most vivid example I have of this is I imagine the Wright brothers when they're trying to get us airborne and fly planes. I could just imagine all onlookers around saying, "What are you doing? People aren't meant to fly. Birds fly, don't. Why are you chasing this crazy dream?" And now look how important flying is to us as a society. And so that doesn't happen if the Wright brothers don't disrupt the norm and go off that path and try something. It's so. The bold framework is something I've certainly I use and I educate individuals and teach them about that. But I also check myself and ensure that I'm following this framework of being audacious and bold. And so that's something that's been proven to be very, very important.
Gotcha. You talk a little bit about the that you got to have with your dad those last 3 years where you got to spend time with it. What does it mean to you to be a dad? You also said that you had 3 children. What does that mean? What does that look like? What is the responsibility that's there? Yeah.
I can. That's a great question because putting that in words, it's all emotion for me. And I look back at to the guide to show people. I remember once I was a father of 3, and my son, the youngest, he was probably like 12 years old. One day we were driving, and I was taking a basketball practice, and we started talking about how we treat people, right? Mm-hmm. And it's important to treat people with kindness and respect and dignity. All things that I've been preaching since they were time they came out of the womb. Yeah, and to hear him sort of talk about that, and I remember I said something like, "Where did you get that from? How do you know that?" And he's like, "I see you do it all the time, Dad." And I was floored right away immediately because again, remember I talked earlier, everyone's looking, right? That includes our children, and it's hit me in such profound ways because yes, I want that to be the lesson, but it also was like, yeah, now he's seeing it. And words are words, actions will really make the difference. And so fatherhood, again, the impact, I talked about impact earlier. Fatherhood allows me to have a tremendous amount of impact on my children. I want them to exceed me on so many levels and rise above whatever I've accomplished in life. I want them to have so much more. But then I also, my deep desire for my children is for them to continue to also go in the world and have impact. And so to be able to usher in change makers, right? They want to be change makers, and so be able to go along that next wave of change makers out making a difference in society. It's just it's an honor. It's a privilege and a thrill to be a father and have the kind of impact I have. But yeah, I'm something I have immensely, absolutely.
Absolutely. And for, I think I caught this here because it's, I have 5 sons and I have 3 daughters. And I want you to talk to me a little bit about the difference between raising a son compared to raising a daughter and what that impact and the emotional and the responsibility and all that things that, because it is different. You can't, no way you can tell me that I'm able of being the same father to the boys that I am to the girls. So I want to hear from you what it's like.
So 2 daughters and a son. I had 2 girls first, and my son was the last one. When I was about to be a father for the first time, without question, truth be told, I wanted a girl in the worst way. I wanted to be a father to a girl. When you're raising a girl, you want to, as a father, you're the first man they fall in love with, right? Ever loved. And you want to be able to show them how they should be treated, like the princesses that they are. And you want the best for them. In contrast to my son, who also, and I think for why it's also different is I also gave my son my father's name, right? So it was like a responsibility thing, like I'm passing. And he and I've already had that talk about, it's a job to continue that, continue that down when he has his first son.
Uh-huh.
But it very much it's I was gonna say like a responsibility. Like there's like with him, it's like from the time that he was born and he could understand the words, it was almost like, okay, here's how I live my life as a young man, and here's the things that you can do. I was very much looking to guide him in that fashion, where it's different than my daughters, right?
Mhm.
It was a provider for both, as a protector, sure, wanting him to feel safe, and so it was all about security. Where for my son, it was very much, let's get out there, let's do what we got to do. And that's interesting because when I think about it now, and actually I never thought about it to this moment to ask this question, I think I was very, very and very intentional about that audacious nature of my son from day one. And I think it's because that's how I saw myself. And he was in my likeness. He had my name, so I was like, hey, here's what we're gonna do. And that's kind of what our journey looked like. But I don't that way initially with my daughters. It's something I developed over time, and I encourage you to take chances, risks, and those sorts of things. But it was very, so there's very different between raising boys and girls. I've never, like, funny. I think it's a great question. I don't really put a lot of thought into that, but truly, I look at how I approached it. Right, there was without question, there was an absolutely different approach. I wanted to educate my son on, you are going to be a young Black man, and in society, here's certain things as a Black man you need to be mindful of. You need to be aware of. And you sort of talked about it earlier on. So it was almost like it was going through an education, but I was being educated with the survival guide, right? And so, and that wasn't initially the basis of my daughters.
Yeah, I think I really noticed, I don't know if I want to use the word impact, but I noticed the difference in how my thought process with the daughters is when they were ready to get married and I had to accept their choice of man, as the person who's going to spend the rest of their life taking care of my baby, right? And I've been so fortunate that I have some amazing son-in-laws, for three of my daughters. But what I realized is, and I've been talking this a lot in the show lately, is how important it is for us as men to have that ability to take care and do the providing and do the protecting and do the nurturing. I know when we talk about, dad, or, how important it is for the child to have, a dad or somebody to look up to or somebody in their life to kind of walk them through. It's just as important for me and my health to be able to do those things for my kids, and how important that was. And then to see, I realized that I did a pretty good job, because really I just had to be there and love them, be there and love them, be there and love them, right? It wasn't like I had to give like the toys that we bought them that were like, this greatest toy that they just had to have. They forgot about it a year later, right? But when we talk about their lives or their childhood, we're talking about the times when I was there, the times that's what they remember, right? The times that they had a game or they had an event or they were getting ready for a prom or so, whatever those things are, that's what they remember, is me being there and then me being present. And so, as I think through that now, I go, okay, so it was just as important for me, for my health, for my well-being, for me to become the man that I am now, to be able to provide those things for my kids. And I think we miss that sometimes. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, as far as, who you are as a man and stuff now, being able to do that for your kids?
Well, they're definitely an evolution, as well too, where you are as a parent, and you look at your child, and I look at my last child, and I parented very different, and they remind me of that, by the way, quite often too. Right? that speaks to the of me as an individual. You or wisdom, patience, tolerance, acceptance, like all these things you love, and that influences the way you parent. At least in my case, that influences the way I parent. So yeah, I do believe you're right. There is an impact in that regard, and I think one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves is just be cognizant, especially when they're in periods of change. Just be cognizant of those changes that have taken place, and it's not to vilify or chastise the person where you were, because I truly believe everyone's doing, the best with what they have, what they know in that moment. But the evolution of who you become, not only just as parents, but as individuals, that also happens and to us in our lives as we gain knowledge and education and information, we evolve and grow and develop, and that's what life should be. So,
yeah, I think it really gives us a example of the difference between equity and equality. Thinking about that I have children and I'm going to treat them all well, but I'm going to treat them differently, right?
sure.
Because is going to be, these are the things that we get to do as a family, but they're not equal. We're not doing the exact same thing for every single kid, and then we somehow expect that we should, oh, it's not fair. That's well, no. They're different kids. They're different people.
I think, and you're right, because I think when you and bearing that in mind, you're respecting those differences, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely, my daughter, she's on the autism spectrum, so she's got a developmental delay, and I naturally can't do. There's things that I can't treat her the exact same way as her siblings because of those differences, and so you want to respect your children's individual by respecting the differences and adjusting accordingly to bear in mind those differences that they have. But yeah, equity and equality are two different things, man.
One of my other pillars is trust and our ability, because trust, I think, is a big part of how we're able to move through life. Is we have to have this ability to trust. Are you the other person who says, I'm going to trust you until you prove me wrong? Or are you the person who says, you have to prove that I can trust you before I'm even going to do it? I'm not trusting you on anything about any level. Or is there kind of layers in between? Because when we think about, I think about you being, the commissioner of an organization, and are you trusting, your players? Are you trusting are you trusting, however that process works?
Sure.
How do you get to show up and be able to trust people?
I think so forth. It makes a difference in terms of where you're at. So I mean, if you're in the professional setting, and let's use my basketball league as a commissioner of. Well, going into it as a league, we establish the expectations of what we want our players to conduct themselves in the communities, how they conduct themselves on the court, how they represent our league, and we trust that they accept these expectations, right? And they act accordingly. In personal relationships, I without a question, everyone gets the benefit of the doubt from me. I don't make people jump through hoops to get my trust. Quite honestly, if I was on the other side, I'd hate to have to do that myself. And and really, why can't people be deserving of the benefit of the doubt? Even if they make a mistake, and they trust this question, why can't they be deserving of that? And there's no reason why not. And so, I'll give the benefit of the doubt. And even if you have a mishap, it's not an automatic. I slam the door shut and let's figure out what happened here. Or maybe something that led to that maybe wasn't totally in your control that happened that led to where we're at now. So and even then, chances are I'll probably still forgive you, kind of deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
who I am, and I for me, it takes a lot to erode trust completely. Will I have to adjust how I interact with you and deal with you because of what's taking place? Sure, that could happen. But in terms of me flat out not trusting someone, it would have to be pretty extreme. And from at least based on the experience that I had. But yeah, I think we're all deserving of trust, and why not? No one comes to this earth perfect and mistake free. And an idea of making someone work for something that others have given to me freely, it just doesn't even seem right.
Well, it comes from the assumption that people are inherently good, that people want the good in others, that people want to see both people succeed. And I know there's people who don't.
And by not offering that, you're actually assuming the opposite. They're inherently bad, and they inherently don't have good intentions for you, and they inherently aren't worth being trusted. So,
yeah, and that can be, when I see people or I meet people who are like that, it can be a hard life. I mean, like you got to get up thinking that somebody's going to do something to you every single day. And you walk through life with this cloud, that just follows you around because you're expecting the worst. And I don't know, how somebody
those are people I pray for. Those are people you pray for because of, our experiences shape us. And they've had some experience that got them to where they're at. Like, are there people who naturally don't trust? Yeah, those individuals exist. Are there people who choose not to trust based on what they've gone through? Yeah, there's a lot of people like that.
I love what you just said, because you said experiences shape us. Experience make us who we are. How do we take those experiences and have them shape us in a way that can move us forward instead of taking those experiences and have it move us backwards? Because there's so many people that you talk to, you think of, if this leaves clues, and you see, successful people who are doing well in life, they've been able to take those experiences and make a positive out of them. Sure. And what separates that difference between that person who does that compared to the person who sees every experience as the negative? Talk to me about that.
I think perspective is a big piece in this. Oftentimes use the analogy of life being a series of hills and valleys, right? And as we move through our continuum, we're going to go up on the hill, and on top of the hill, things are great. We're excited. We're happy. We have fulfillment. We have joy. We can celebrate. Things are it's a wonderful place to be. But given that, life is that continuum, sometimes we're going to have that dip. I want to go down that valley. And in the valley, it's painful. It hurts. There's disappointments. There's scars. There's bad stuff that's happened. Maybe you've lost a loved one. Like, there's all sorts of things that can happen in that valley. We have a choice. We can stay in that valley and wallow in our misery and be upset. And here's the thing about it. No one will ever, 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 say that you don't have the right to be upset. Yes, you've been hurt. Yes, people will give you that grace. You as an individual, you need to decide, do I stay in that valley, in that place of misery, or I start to slowly climb my way up by getting to the top of the hill? Because on the top of the hill, I can celebrate. On the top of the hill, I can find joy, happiness, fulfillment. So it really comes down to your approach and how you view these bad things that happen. Is there a learning opportunity out of them? Is there a lesson that you're trying to be taught that you're not able to see? Like, so there's something in everything. And even the bad stuff, as painful as it could be, as hard as it might be in the moment, as difficult or challenging it is, that unfortunate events don't offer something, I think is a missed opportunity. They offer, and if you're looking close enough, they will. And so it really is tied into a mindset, how you view it, how you perceive it, but then what do you do about it afterwards?
Absolutely. It was funny. I was in the on this trip that I was in, and we were at the line at TSA, and there's a gentleman who was there, and he's like, every time I get into these TSA lines, I always pick the wrong one, and I always have to wait. And I'm like, you know what? I wait all the time too, but you know what? I think it's great because I get to meet people like you. I get to actually spend some time while we're waiting in this line and learn about you and your life and the things that you get to do. I think it's a wonderful experience. And you just look at me like, oh, I guess it could be that way. What an interesting perspective to look at things, because it's us the way we choose, right? We choose whether we're going to take each experience and make something out of it, or we're going to take each of those experiences and go, wait, this is going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Right. How are you dealing with the people that come to you, or the people who look for advice to you that are in those downhill, I'll need some worms when they get to the end of it. How do you do to help them get out of that?
So the coach in me wants to be able to help coach them out of that situation. And that happens by having them do some of the work, or most of the work.
Okay.
As much as you want to help people, and helping them doesn't mean that you gotta dig them out. Helping them means that you can hand them the shovel for them to dig themselves out, right? And because what you're doing is you're empowering individuals to the pathway for themselves, right? That doesn't mean that you can't be supportive, you can't have empathy, that you can't show compassion. Absolutely, showing all those things. But the biggest favor that you can do to individuals who are stuck, who are lost, who are uncertain of what comes next, is being able to help show them that the power that they have to get out of the situation lies within. And it truly, truly, it's very easy to embrace the victimhood lifestyle. And hey, it's what's happened to me, and hey, it's not what it is, and hey, I just gotta accept it. That's super easy. Anyone could do that. But the work to get yourself to a better place, the work to be audacious enough to take that first step, to be bold enough to forget about everything that's happening, to outlast the adversity, to live your truth, to disrupt the norm, to get to that better place. I mean, once you, and the best part about it is once you arrive there, like that sense is like being on the top of that hill. It's just a wonderful place to be. And so, the encourager in me, the coach in me, the helper in me wants people to see that for themselves, and I'll do anything I can for them to help see that, but they still got to do the work, and that's key.
To me, just knowing you for the few times that we've talked, you seem to live the life of what you say and what you do, and you have this show that's called the Audacious Living. Audacious Living. What is audacious living, and what is a day in the life of somebody who lives that way, or a month in the life, or a week in the life of somebody who gets to live an audacious life? What is that like?
And it's interesting because it's like a monetary thing, or it's not the person who has the biggest house or anything like that. A mindset or a way of thinking where you operate freely. You don't second guess yourself. If there's something that you have an interest, you go after it. You don't think about what people might say about you, or what others might think, or do you belong. You think of things like the syndrome as an example. And the imposter syndrome says it makes you force to question yourself and makes you think that you're not worthy of being in certain spaces. Well, you don't listen to that. It's funny, when I started this podcast back in 2020, we just celebrated 400 episodes. I'm really happy about that. We started the podcast in 2020. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm into podcasts back in 2008. And between, say, 2008 and 2020, I've probably done 5 or 6 different types of podcasts and different topics, things that moved me in the moment I wanted to share or talk about. So I've done quite a number of different topics. And I've also been podcasting for a while too. I mean, there's 12 years of doing this stuff before it became mainstream. And I remember when I was about to start the Audacious Living, I remember this thought come to mind saying, yeah, are you sure you can do this? Like, podcasting, you haven't podcasted in a few years. Like, how do you even think people want to hear your voice anymore? Like, don't you realize how many podcasts are open already? Like, who's going to listen to you? Like, when I say the question that inner voice was attacking, man, that inner voice came from me. It really, truly. And despite that, I still took that step forward anyways, right? So it's fighting back those feelings of you're not worthy or you're not good enough, because we absolutely are good enough. And those who sort of live this audacious path don't second guess their value or worth. They know how important they are, and they know how important it is that they take that step. And the beauty in that step is sometimes you will move forward and you won't get the desired outcome. And people will call that failing. Some will call it mistakes, whatever they want to categorize that. But I truly, truly, that a mistake only happens when you walk away from the experience and you didn't pick up the lesson. That's when you made a mistake. If you've gone through a situation, if you've gone through an experience and you walk away without the lesson, you've made the mistake because you put yourself at risk of repeating the same again. That's a mistake. If I try something that I've never done before, there's one of two options. I will either succeed, which is great because that's what you start something anyways to do, successful, or I'm not successful. But what I'm armed with is the experience, the lessons, and the knowledge of what not to do next time. If you don't have those things and you go through experience, I'll say again, that's when you've made the mistake.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is so good. When you think about health, mental or physical health, what are some things that you do to make sure that you maintain this ability to have that life that you talked about, to be audacious? Because if you're, I just think of people that are in poor health, whether it's physical or mental health, that struggle with even getting up in the morning to do and live. So what do you attribute your ability to do that? And what are some things that you do to maintain that?
I'm excited to get out of bed in the morning. I'm using an alarm clock. I've never pressed a snooze button a day in my life. When it's time to get up, I jump out of bed, no exaggeration, and I'm absolutely ready to go. My mind is always already thinking about the things I can do, and it's almost like, what can I accomplish today? And sometimes going into the day, I say, okay, there are 2 or 3 things I want to accomplish today, and as long as I accomplish those things I set out early in the morning, then I'm set. And so so I would categorize that as mindset, your frame of thinking. When we think about health, I think what oftentimes we don't think about the interconnectedness between our physical health and our mental health, but the two are very, very related. And so the mental thing is something I spend a lot of. The fact that I podcast about this stuff really that supports my mental health in so many ways. It frames how I view the world. It helps me how I think. The things that I think about, thoughts that I have, how I view others and people. I think those all contribute to our mental health, and also where I see myself and how I fit into the world. That's all a big part of the mental health. Physical, we've got to take care of our bodies. I waited to pay attention to the physical, and now at a stage where I was more weight, and so I'm feeling good about these days that I've been on this health regimen that's lasted a while. I dropped like 30 pounds, and I feel good about myself, and I'm continuing that. I want to continue that momentum, and reach my goals. And so the health thing, I think, from the physical standpoint, you have to be intentional about it. You got to be deliberate about it, and you have to not forget about the things that you need to do to stay in top physical health as best as you possibly can. But I would say the two are very much interrelated and they're connected. And so not forgetting about that connection is important, and being really intentional about your actions as well.
Do you think having like a mindset of things that you can move forward, a mindset of looking into the future, a mindset of that today is going to be a better day than yesterday was, attributes to a longer life, or attributes to, I know there's outliers and stuff, but just the general, contributing positive about life contributes to a successful, happy, audacious, long-lasting life?
I truly believe so. I mean, if depression is the things in the past that's taken place in the past. But when you look at what anxiety is, it's being concerned with a future that hasn't arrived yet. Whereas the here and now is just where you're at. I can control this moment with you, Dr. B, because you and I are engaged in a wonderful conversation. And so I can control this moment. What's going to happen down the road? I'll get there when I get there. What's happened already? It's in the past. The most I can do is take that lesson from the past and use it for my future. But that's as far as it goes. So I absolutely think there's a connection between that and longer health. There's that we think about are important. You hear oftentimes that the brain's being in that flight or flight mode, right? And when you're in that state of mind, that heightened state, it's everything's on a high alert. That can be healthy for us physically if we're in that state all the time. Whereas, I, as best I possibly can, to spend as much time in the state where I'm using my creative thinking part of my brain, where I'm thinking about ideas and thinking about potentials and thinking about possibilities, right? Those things are exciting, and it gets my juices going. And I think that I find for myself personally, I operate better in that frame of mind. So I simply try ways to get in that frame of mind as much as I can. Right, and be there as often, spend as much time possibly as you're never going to be there all the time. And there's times, like I said, the hills and valleys. There's times going to come down in that valley. But the key is how quickly can I get myself on top of that hill as fast as possible. And sometimes it's just knowing the things that drive you. I remember once I was with a friend of mine, and he was going through a sort of difficult family circumstance, and it was really, really good for him. And I remember he categorized it as the worst thing that's ever happened to him, and he was working through it. And we, a bunch of us kind of went out one evening, and we were with friends. And when I talked about community early, he enjoys his community. He finds so much pleasure and joy with that. So we're out with friends, and he was having a blast. I remember one of us took a photo. I looked at the photo. I'm like, man, he looks so happy. No one would ever know, that he's going through the worst period of his life because he's so happy. And in fact, it spoke to me so strongly. I went to him and I said, remember how terrible you were feeling? Like, look how happy you are now. You are at a place that no one would ever believe. Remember what got you there, and I don't know what else you can do to stay here as long as you possibly can. And I think that's so important to know that for ourselves. What is it that charges us? What gets us excited? What gives us joy, pleasure, happiness? And how can we find ways to stay as close to those things for as long as we possibly can? That was where I really think will contribute not only to your mental, but to a longer life.
Oh, man, that's so good. We're just about at the time. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about in this time that we're having together that I didn't get to or that I didn't?
Listen, I am thrilled to be able to engage in these types of conversations. And from my mind, I don't think there's anything we haven't talked about that people need to know for themselves. I'm pleased to be able to share times like this here or on my platform. It truly is a blessing. I'm honored to, and I appreciate, providing the opportunity to share like this, Dr. B. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And thank you for those who are watching today, because there's, I love to say this, is success leaves clues, and you're looking for that fulfilled life. You're looking for that audacious life. You're looking for that ability to move forward. I think the things that we were able to talk about today, the things that we were able to unpack and realize, if you can apply some of these aspects to your life, now, whether it's fatherhood or whether it's this, what I need to do to move forward, you could be so simple. And so, whether you hit subscribe or I love for you to do that, or just continue to watch the ones that you're interested in, I would encourage you to say, hey, if this is where I need to be, or this is where I want to go, and these guys are hitting it, these guys are making it happen, maybe I can do some of the same things that they're doing. And so I hope you enjoyed the show today. Audley, I thank you for being part of this journey, this podcast. I promise you that I'm learning from you. I get to, watch you, and, you're in 400 and I'm in, at least on this podcast, we're in the 60s or something like that. So I can't wait to catch up with you. I can't wait to talk to you again. And as we go through these journeys together. So thank you again for being on the show. Thank you for being part of it. Look forward to talking to you on the next one.
My pleasure. All the best, and then keep it moving. That's all I can say.
I love it.